right, good evening, everyone. Camille, we can start whenever you are ready. And hopefully you all can still hear me. All right, good evening, my Spelman sisters and guests of NAASC Atlanta chapter. We are so happy to have you here this evening to join us in this wonderful discussion of this amazing book by our very own Spelman sister, Dr. Ella F. Washington. So we are appreciative of you being here. We're doing this book study in 3 sections that align with how the book is designed, and Dr. Ella will be able to share those details with us shortly. But I wanted to introduce myself first and set the stage for this evening. I am Dr. Kyra Caldwell Templeton, graduate of Spelman College, class of 2004, and I have the esteemed pleasure of serving as the chair of the programs committee for NAASC Atlanta chapter. Please be advised that this chat is not just for us to cover the entire book cover to cover. We know that you're going to be reading it cover to cover, but we want to make sure that we identify some key aspects and some key points for a candid discussion. I will now introduce our wonderful president, Ms. Crystal Sidbury, to bring greetings on behalf of the chapter.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Crystal Sidbury, class of 93, and I am president of the National Alumni Association of Spelman College, the Atlanta chapter. I am thrilled to welcome you to section 1 of our book talk series on Unspoken by Dr. Ella F. Washington. This series promises to be an enlightening exploration of the profound insights Dr. Washington has provided. We look forward to a rich discussion and a deep dive into the themes and concepts presented in this remarkable and award-winning text. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you find this experience both engaging and inspiring. I will now kick it over to our moderator to introduce our esteemed guest.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I have the esteemed pleasure of introducing Dr. Ella F. Washington. For nearly 2 decades, Dr. Ella F. Washington, an organizational psychologist, has been devoted to advancing her mission of elevating humanity in the workplace. A distinguished authority on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, she serves as the founder and CEO of Elevate Solutions, an organization committed to integrated DEI strategies, where she leads efforts to foster healthier, more equitable work environments. Alongside her role as professor of practice at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business, Dr. Washington is a sought-after consultant, speaker, and authority on workplace dynamics. Her expertise spans a spectrum addressing issues such as gender equality, diversity, and the cultivation of inclusive corporate cultures. In her recently published book, Unspoken, Dr. Washington directly assists individuals navigating the challenges of corporate environments. By decoding the implicit rules governing these spaces, she empowers them to overcome obstacles and fulfill their career aspirations. Unspoken has garnered widespread support and is an Amazon bestseller across areas of business, diversity and inclusion, business mentoring, and coaching and workplace behavior. Her first publication, The Necessary Journey, Making Real Progress on Equity and Inclusion, underscores her dedication to transformative change in workplaces. Recognized for her pedagogical excellence, Dr. Washington has garnered accolades such as Excellence in Teaching 2021 Award, and Inclusion in Poet and Quant 40 Under 40 MBA professors in 2023. Moreover, Dr. Washington's commitment extends beyond academia and business. As the founder of the Elevate Charity Foundation, she channels her passion for social impact through free webinars, community programs, and research initiatives. Previously, She spearheaded Gallup's diversity and inclusion practice and co-hosted the Center of Black Voices Cultural Competence podcast. Residing in Washington, D.C., Dr. Washington continues to shape the discourse on inclusive workplaces through her multifaceted roles and endeavors. Please join me in welcoming our Spelman sister, Dr. Ella F. Washington. You can give a round of applause. You can use your emoticons, but let's welcome Dr. Ella F. Washington. We have prepared questions to help guide the discussion. The audience will be also able to ask questions. So let's just jump in. Dr. Washington, could you please provide your overall motivation to write Unspoken? Who was your intended audience? And also, if you can orient our audience on how the book is organized and identify some key points from section 1.
Well, first of all, I would just want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure. It's a joy to be with my Spelman sisters. Dr. Caldwell, thank you so much for the kind introduction. I'm so excited to be in this space to talk about something that's near and dear to me, which of course is my book, Unspoken. I think your question was around the motivation for this book. And, it's interesting. I think it probably deep-seated, probably started way back at Spelman in some ways. But, I worked for a while in the corporate world, even after I got my PhD in organizational behavior. And I recognized early on that there were rules and then there were the other rules in the corporate workplace. And what I mean by that is, there are the HR handbook rules, such as business hours are from 9 to 5 p.m., right? But then when you're actually in an organization, you may realize that no one really schedules meetings after 3 p.m. on a Friday. So that would be an informal rule. Now, some of that is just culture, right? And as fascinating as it is, what led to this book is not the things that are just our culture in organizations, but those things that actually lead to differences in experiences, especially for women and people of color, especially. And so some of those may be, what it actually takes to get promoted, that, social events do matter. What you wear is, discussed in those promotion meetings, and those type of informal and often unspoken rules. They started to irritate me. The more I learned about them, the more I wanted to do something about them. And that is the main impetus for this book, is to not only provide the knowledge for folks that are navigating their various workplaces, but to also ignite these necessary conversations so that we can speak the unspoken and give life to how we can really navigate these workplaces.
Thank you so much. And if you can share with the audience kind of how you organize the book into sections and the insight behind that.
Absolutely. So, the book is organized into 3 different sections. The first section is all about understanding yourself and how you show up in the workplace and thinking about how you want to show up in the workplace. So the 3 chapters that we'll be kind of diving in tonight under section 1 are owning your story, the power of your strengths, and being authentic and code switching. So as you can see from the titles, that's all about, again, who we are and how we show up in our workplaces. Now, the second part of the book is all about some tactical tools and steps you can use to actually navigate your workplaces. So from making sure that you have your networks of influence, or understanding the power dynamics in your organization by reading the room, or finding ways to negotiate not only your salaries, but other aspects of your career, such as promotions, such as job titles, etc. So those are all tactical tools that I wanted to empower us to be able to use. And in the third part of the book, it's really more about looking beyond what's right in front of you. It's more about thinking about your career holistically. How do you want to live your life? Where does career fit into your life's purpose and the work that you do every day? It also talks about finding your niche in an organization and making sure that your strengths are aligned with what the organization values so that you can maximize your opportunity and work doesn't have to break your soul. And so those are the 3 different areas of the book, and ultimately all put together, I hope they help to create your own playbook of your own career.
Thank you so much. I look forward to digging into section 3 because I feel like I'm in that stage right now. I'm trying to figure out where I fit in so I won't break my soul and break my back, my neck, my arm in the process. So I'm excited about digging into section 3. So thank you for that. So we have one first question we want to jump into, and then of course for our audience, please feel free to engage in the chat. We'll have opportunities for you to take yourselves off of mute to just share in an informal way. So the first question is, in section 1, you share personal reflections about your upbringing, which is so critical, and the experiences that shape your views on the workplace and race specifically in the workplace. Can you share more about how those early experiences influence your career path and your research focus?
Absolutely. Well, it really wasn't until graduate school or even after graduate school where I really started to understand that how we grow up, whatever our environments are, has a huge impact on not only who we are as adults, but how we show up in the world and particularly the workplace. So, like many of us, women of color, I used to compartmentalize everything. This is work, this is home, this is Spelman time, this is, AKA time or whatever it is. And while sometimes it's important to compartmentalize, it's really valuable to understand how all those things are intertwined because you're just one person, right? We can have different selves, we can code switch, but we're all just one person. And so in writing this book, I did a lot more digging and personal reflection on why I do the work that I do, why I value the things that I do. And a lot of my experiences fell back onto what I observed at home, of course. Growing up with my mom as a single parent, and how she worked so hard, loved her job so much. She was a nurse, but she often felt like work was breaking her soul. And so I was dealing with this tension, seeing growing up that she loved nursing. I mean, she didn't want to do anything else. She knew she wanted to be a nurse from the time she was 4 years old and was burnt in a fire. And the nurses treated her so well in the hospital. She knew from that moment forward she wanted to be a nurse, and that's what she did. However, though she loved her job, she hated some of the unspoken rules that were holding her back, such as, discrimination, such as, not being included in all aspects of the job, such as shifting standards for her performance and how she was evaluated. And so those early experiences really had an impact on me. And the more I learned about our relationship with work and how often we don't take the time to be thoughtful about what is the relationship we want to have with our jobs, with our careers. We spend more than a third of our lives working. Like that is a research statistic. More than 90,000 hours of the typical person's life are spent working or at work. And I usually say it's more than 90,000 hours because we're on our phones, emailing, we're doing things all the time. We're rarely disconnected fully from our jobs. And so I don't want to spend a third of my life doing anything that doesn't help me to feel whole and doesn't help me to thrive. I'm not saying that work will be fun every day, but again, it certainly shouldn't break our souls.
That's right, absolutely. I'm going to put a question in the chat, and of course, as mentioned earlier, feel free to take yourself off of mute to respond. But think about it. Share one word or phrase that represents a feeling or experience regarding how you have been treated in the workplace based on race and or gender. I'm going to pause for a moment, give you a second to kind of conjure up those feelings that may have happened today. One word or phrase that represents a feeling. Ooh, gaslit. All right. Do you want to share more if you don't mind?
Sure. This actually happened. It's a specific incident I'm thinking about, and it happened quite a few years ago. Nothing recently, thank goodness. But I remember I was working as an HR manager for a large company, and they were having, I guess, like a meeting for all HR managers nationwide. And, they had, like, I guess a little after party where people were grabbing drinks, and we took, a bus there. And the VP of HR for this company, very drunk, started singing Dixie songs. And I was just I was just in shock and, wondered if this was happening, if, what I thought was happening was really happening. And then, everybody on the bus started joining along and singing along, including the one other Black person that was on the bus. And gaslit is the word that came to mind because I just wondered, well, maybe it's me. It's something, maybe I'm perceiving something wrong because this was actually my first, I would say, real job after graduating from Spelman. So that's just what came to my mind because I was just in complete shock and I thought, well, maybe this is acceptable because I didn't have much experience to draw from at that time.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being transparent. Yeah, especially like when you graduate, you don't know what to expect if you haven't had like an internship opportunity or something like that over the summer where you may get hired by the company that you intern with. And so you just kind of got to figure it out on your own. And you may even be a little bit nervous to even mention something or to say anything for fear of, being judged or ridiculed or outcasted. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else? I put in the chat aggressive or not flexible, just because a lot of times individuals, I like to ask questions, right? I'm a learner. We'll talk a little bit about top 5 strengths and those type of things with Gallup, but I'm a learner. And so whenever I ask questions, a lot of times people were offended or thought that I was trying to poke holes in everything or catch them off guard. But I really just wanted to know in order to do my job well, in order to be successful and excel in the task that was assigned to me. So, yeah, finally I had to pull someone aside like, hey, I'm not trying to like get you. I just really need to know in order for me to fulfill the request or what have you. I see something else in the chat, discounted. Can you say more about that, Crystal?
Yeah, I use that term because I was in a conversation with someone, and it was to me just a general conversation, and he made the comment. He was like, "Wow, I'm really impressed. You speak very well," and I at that point I kind of stopped speaking because I didn't really know what. So it just took me. Caught me off guard a little bit because I wasn't expecting something that was just to me I don't know what you thought I was going to sound like. So it just to me discounted, what I just thought was just usual and customary, and people speak proper English, and for them to have made that comment, I just was kind of thrown off a little bit.
Thank you for saying that word discounted. I really like that word. And that has happened to me multiple times and some friends. And even it happened probably about 2 weekends ago. I went to a wedding and a friend of mine, Spelman grad, she was one of the speakers at the wedding and was giving one of the blessings. And the person who came, another Black woman that came after her said, wow, that's a hard act to follow. You speak so well, And so I kind of was like, I kind of was taken aback because I wasn't expecting someone that looked like me to say that. And I got what she was trying to say. Like, she made a good speech or she said great things. But in the workplace, when someone, especially if someone that doesn't look like you, makes that comment, it does make you feel discounted. So thank you for bringing that word to my vocabulary because I never even considered using that in that way. No equity, Crystal Jackson. Could you say a little bit more about that, please?
Yes, I would say experiencing no equity in how projects are distributed and also the complexity of the projects. So my experience is that me and people who look like me typically got the more complex projects and less praise, and then the clear people got the easier projects and a lot of praise. So
Yeah, thank you. Definitely can understand that. And I didn't know where you were going with that because I thought you were going to say that you didn't get the more complex. So that's very interesting. But you had the hardest task, the hardest project, the most complex, but you didn't get a lot of recognition. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Anything that you want to add to any of the words that were dropped in the chat or lifted, Dr. Ella, that you want to speak about?
You know, all of them really resonated with me. But the story about not knowing if you should say something or not really hits home. And I think it certainly goes to show there are so many unspoken things, not just in the workplace, but we don't even know that we should be having these conversations with our peers. And with our Spelman sisters and with our, friends and family outside of work. Because part of how the system continues to discriminate against us is because we are not vocal about what's happening to us. And I certainly understand the risk that one considers, do I speak up, do I not? And so I encourage everyone not to have to figure that out on your own, right? A lot of what my book talks about are the need for a network that you can talk to about these issues transparently. For me, my biggest network is Spelman, and I talk to a Spelman sister almost every day in some capacity. And now I know when something happens to, gut check, like, wait, is this normal? And, I have academic friends that understand how academia works. I have consultant friends understand that world. So beyond just your Spelman community, you also want to build community in your industry and build community with people who understand exactly what you're going through and can help you navigate. And beyond community, I think that's where mentorship and sponsorship really come in. And so I just want to make that Spelman sister feel heard and valued. We have all been there. Like, do I say something? Do I not? And I just encourage us to not have to figure it out on our own. Many of our mentors and older Spelman sisters or peer Spelman sisters have gone through the same things in some way, shape, or form, and we don't have to figure it out alone.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your response. Let's continue our next question for Dr. Ella. So, and this is a focus on like the overall concepts of silence, race, and advice, overall advice. So you mentioned the concept of unspoken truths about race. Why do you think that these conversations remain so difficult in professional settings? And what advice would you give to young professionals, especially those from underrepresented groups, about like navigating race and identity in their career journey?
So, I mean, the workplace is a microcosm of our larger society, right? And so race remains the number one challenging issue in the United States from a political perspective, from an everyday perspective. We can't even agree on what we teach students in our education system about race, right? And so because of our sordid and painful history around race in the United States, we also see that in the workplace. For people who are navigating these moments and feeling othered, and they may be the only one in the room that look like them, or the only one in the company even that looks like them. First of all, I encourage you to take some time to be introspective and think about, who are you and who do you want to be in terms of your workplace persona. And that's the reason why I start with owning your story in this book, because, no one can tell you who you are. You have to determine and find within yourself who you are, what is your identity, and then figure out how you want to navigate that identity within the confines of your workplace. Because we know that, bringing your whole self to work is not a real thing. It's not a real thing, especially for people like us, right? So I often say you want to bring your most professional self to work, and we hope that you can be authentic within that professional self, but it is still your professional self. You don't want me to be my worst self at work, right? And we all are multifaceted. But no one can tell you who you are once you know who you are for yourself and whose you are as well. I am a spiritual person, and so once I get those two things in my mind, it doesn't matter what everybody else says, right? But without that grounding, it can be really difficult to have these conversations, to navigate them, and to also observe some of the painful things that happen in regards to race in the workplace.
So, you mentioned earlier about sponsorship and mentorship. Could you speak a little bit about the difference between the two?
Yes. So a mentor can be someone who has been in your position before, someone you look up to, someone who you even aspire to have a similar job as. Or they can also be a peer. Some of my most valuable lessons have come from peer mentors, people who are willing to extend themselves and share in community with me, answer questions, and guide me in a particular way, right? So mentors help us to navigate these spaces, and oftentimes they've been there before us, right? Now, a sponsor, I like to think of it as like a sports sponsor or a sponsor for the Olympics, right? A sponsor is someone who says your name in rooms where you may not even be, right? They are the ones who go before you and really advocate for you. But just like in the Olympics, you got to prove yourself worthy to be sponsored. They're not going to just say, pick your name out of a hat and say, oh, this person should be sponsored. And so how that translates in the workplace is you have to prove yourself, right? You have to demonstrate your performance, you have to demonstrate your commitment and build relationships. And through that, you will get sponsorship. Now, sometimes a mentor can also be a sponsor. They are not always mutually exclusive. But the difference is usually sponsors are 2 to 3 levels above you in the hierarchy of your organization. And again, they often, are their job is to advocate for you, especially when you are not even in the room to advocate for yourself.
I love that. And I definitely believe in that and have been a recipient of that positive talk when I'm not in the room, and then also have provided that space for others when they're not in the room, being that voice. So definitely have seen the benefits of it, and appreciate all of that, all of the connections, and connectedness is one of my other top five. So I really lean into that strength as well. Thank you. Any young professionals on the line, 1 to 4 years in the profession, even career changers? I would count that, right? That you're new to that particular profession. And if you are not new to the profession or to your career, and the question is also in the chat, what kind of advice for my seasoned professionals? We are live streaming this, so we may have some folks on YouTube that are watching. What advice would you offer to those individuals just now starting out? If you're retired, I know you got some great advice. What would you say to that young professional, that young Spelman grad? Drop it in the chat or feel free to take yourself off of mute.
Um, I would offer them to be in the habit of summarizing their understanding of a conversation and sending that, out as an email to, if it's their boss or whoever, because a lot of times there's misunderstanding as to what an expectation was. And sometimes you're several years into your profession before you realize that, and so you just kind of want to be in the habit of summarizing what a conversation was about and what the expectations were, and then letting people look at it. So if it needs to be changed, it can be.
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal Jackson. I see somebody in the chat. Camille says, be careful of the precedents you set in the workplace. They will follow you and may be hard to change. Absolutely. I think it kind of speaks to about like your personal persona. How do you want to be perceived? How do you want to be viewed as a professional in that space? And it may change from one workplace culture to the next, but you have to be at one with that and at peace with that before you kind of can do anything else. So thank you, Camille, for that advice. Anything else?
I might add to those comments that your brand is so important, right? Your brand is part of one of those things that speaks about you when you're not in the room. And so in chapter 3, there are a list of questions that you can ask your peers, your managers, around your brand. How are you perceived? You know, what things do people love working about you? What things are challenging to work with you that maybe you can improve upon? How do you show up, right? And maybe, you know, what things are you doing that show up really well in your organization? And again, what are some areas of opportunity? I would also add, you know, plus one to what our Spelman sister earlier said around sending those clarifying emails. I think they serve multiple purposes, right? As she said, they serve the purpose to make sure that we're on the same page about what we discussed and what our next steps. And that can just be helpful to make sure I understand, but it also is helpful in figuring out, okay, who's doing what. But the third thing it also does, as we like to say, is CYA. In environments where you may not be always given the benefit of the doubt, or you may be challenged, or there may be those shifting performance standards, as we've talked about, you know, having that email chain is extremely valuable. And so you're not doing it necessarily to have a gotcha moment, but you are doing it just proactively. One, again, it helps you stay organized, but also, especially in environments where you may be feeling like you're not truly valued or seen, or there may be some nefarious things going on, you have those email chains and you didn't just start doing it when an issue came about. You know, it is just your mode of operation.
It's all about those receipts. Absolutely. And like you said, it's not a gotcha moment. It's just proof of purchase, right? Proof of exchange, proof of interaction and what transpired during that interaction. I know I have a habit of creating different folders in my Outlook. So any emails pertaining to that said subject, I kind of just put it in there and file it away as you know, as a record. And another way that I keep receipts is I calendar everything, even if it wasn't on my calendar initially. If I did it, I go back and add it. And then also I can sort by color codes on my calendar. So anything I did pertaining to said topic, I can search and say, hey, yeah, on this day, this is what I did. And even in the body of the calendar invite, put like links, things of that nature as additional documentation.
I think you
So
need to
that would be
do
my
a
advice to.
class on scheduling. That sounds amazing. I love it. I love it. And you know, the other thing though, so we don't just want to talk about kind of the negative or challenging parts. I also keep a kudos folder. So whenever a student for me at Georgetown, you know, says they really enjoyed my class, one, it helps me to stay motivated in my job on those tough days, right? But two, when I need some examples for leadership of the impact I'm having in and out of the classroom, or from a client testimonial, you know, when they said, you know, how a session I did really had an impact on them. Again, I keep a kudos folder because you never know when you'll need it. When I was working in corporate environments, you know, I would go back and refer to those emails when I was writing my own performance review. And so, you know, often people are biased based on just the information they have available, right? And so if your boss doesn't get that kudos email, then maybe that's something you could forward them as well so they can have visibility on the wonderful things that you are doing in the organization.
I love that. That's a great idea. I'm going to steal that idea from you. That's awesome. So now we're a little ahead of schedule, which is great. Dr. Ella has another Black job she has to get to shortly. She's a professor, and so she has multiple Black jobs. And so now's the time for us to see if anyone has any questions from the audience, some things that we did not discuss or anything you're curious about. Now is the time.
I have a question. This is, well, you can see me because my video is on. I do have a question, and I'm curious to see if anyone has any particular rituals that they do before they get out of the car or leave the house to go into the office. In the introduction, it was a brief comment about the
the angry Black woman, and in my years of working in corporate America, I was always very mindful of the volume and the tone of my voice. But even before I went into work, I would listen to particular songs to just kind of get me energized and kind of distracted from what I was about to walk into or what I felt that I was walking into. And so I just wondered if anyone else did any of that kind of stuff, because, particularly during times when it's election season and people are saying things that are politically oriented, and you want to respond, but you shouldn't. Do you have any advice or suggestions or things that might help with that? Because you see people, you're friends with people on social media, and you see the things they say in their personal life, and then the next thing you have to go into the office and ask them to send you a report for thus and so, and it's just different than it was before you saw that post.
That's a great question.
I know it was kind of full, but I just wondered.
I'm looking at the chat, all the
Oh,
examples
let me see.
being used. I know for me, I'm a music person. And so whatever my mood is, some days I need to really listen to gospel music. I have a playlist, a good energy morning playlist. And so that is my go-to playlist. There are gospel songs on it. There are positive affirmation songs on it. There's songs that I like that I know will get me in a positive mood, because oftentimes I know I need that, right? I also love positive affirmations, like especially when I'm really having a difficult time. I have affirmations written down in my work journal. I have affirmations, stuck on my sticky notes on my computer. And saying those out loud for me helps me to center myself, especially before I go in front of a large audience. I also say a prayer. I often say, Lord, give me what I need for today.
Yeah.
And whatever that is, please give it to me, because sometimes I don't know what I'm going to say. I can be prepared, but you never know what kind of questions you're going to get from an audience that you're speaking in front of, or from your students, because they can be challenging as well. And so those are some of the things. I also rely on my lovely group chats. If I need a laugh with my friends, or I'll let them know, hey, I have a tough day going. Send me some prayers, send me some thoughts, send me a laugh. Those are the things that really help me to stay centered. And I found even more recently, it's not just that, initial getting grounded and centered for your day. To me, it's how do I reset when things haven't gone as planned, when that morning was rough, or that first class did not go how it was supposed to go. And so I've often had to figure out, okay, how do I reset? Because I don't want a bad moment to turn into a bad day, to turn into a bad week. And it's on me to reset myself. And I do some of those same things, but I might take a walk. I might call my mom. I might do some other things. And for me, I just have a list of things, okay, to do in order to reset in those tough moments.
Thank you. I love that. And I see some things. Music was a theme in the chat as well. Dr. Ashley Lane has a great question. What are tips to show support for other Black women, that you are for them and that we can share space? I love that question. Any thoughts about that, Dr. Ella?
Yes. One, create room at the table, right? So I know we often feel like, maybe we just got to the table, and how can we create space? But I promise you can. So for example, if you have a monthly lunch with an executive leader, maybe one of those lunches you invite somebody else, and you invite somebody that needs exposure. If you can't attend a conference, don't just say no, put forward someone else's name. Again, someone that could probably use the exposure and the experience and can build their network. I also say, go out of your way to build a relationship. And by that, I don't mean, if someone doesn't want to engage with you, but a lot of times, especially if they are newer to the organization than you, they are just trying to figure it out. And they didn't all go to Spelman, right? And so they may have had negative experiences with Black women in these spaces. We are from a very particular experience of love and community, and it is instilled in us for the 4 years we're at Spelman and then our lifetime, that we are lifting each other. We can all, have room at the table, but everyone doesn't come from that experience, right? And so I think it's on us to go out of our way to be sisterly, to bring them into the fold. And if they reject it, then, that's their loss. But more times than not, they will accept it and be grateful and hopefully pay it forward as well.
That's excellent advice. Thank you so very much. And thank you all for the questions and pieces of advice for our younger professionals and not only graduates of Spelman, of course, but our sisters. We appreciate all of that. So as mentioned earlier, Dr. Ella has to run, but I want to publicly thank you for answering the call, right? So, I mean, I just took a stab in the dark and was like, hey, I had the opportunity of hearing Dr. Ella speak at the Gallup at Work Summit this past spring and was definitely interested in the work that she's doing. And hey, I'm going to try to reach out and see if we can get her to come. So we really appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come chat with us. We're going to continue the conversation, but before you leave, I want to make sure that you see that I'm sharing in the chat a few things. So if you want to engage further with Dr. Ella, there's a link to her website. And also, she just so happens to be in Atlanta tomorrow at the Gathering Spot doing a fireside chat of the same topic. So if you want to deepen your knowledge and engage further with this text, you can have the opportunity to go see her tomorrow evening. The link is in the chat as well. Please share it. It's been on our NAASC Facebook page. It's been on our Spell Moms, and we have so many various Spell House groups on Facebook and in social media. So share, buy the book as a Christmas present or a birthday present for a young lady, and I will say a young gentleman as well, right? I feel like the advice is it extends, race, gender, what have you. But thank you, Dr. Ella. We really appreciate it. And we hope you have a wonderful class soon.
Listen, it has been my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Anytime I can be of service to our Spelman community, I am elated to do so. I am elated that you all are reading my book, Unspoken. I can't wait to hear how the conversations continue. Thank you for the plug for tomorrow at 7 p.m. at the Gathering Spot. Our Spelman sister, Nzinga Shaw, will also be with me doing that fireside chat. She was one of the folks that I interviewed for the book. So I'm just pumped up to be talking about Unspoken tomorrow. So I hope you all join me at the Gathering Spot. And if you can't make it all the way to Atlanta, please share it with someone who may be interested in coming. Thank you again for having me. And I hope to continue to keep in touch. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn and would love to chat with you individually.
Awesome. Thank you. You're getting some love in the chat. You got some blue hearts, Miss Spelman blue hearts. So again, wonderful. Congratulations on all of your accomplishments. And I know we'll be in contact soon.
Absolutely. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you. You too. All right, so to continue our discussion, I just have one quote for us to kind of think about and any takeaways that you want to share. The quote that I wanted to share is from page 54 and it's on the screen as well. So working from your strengths energizes you because it feels good to be doing what you excel at, and they also help you stand out. I think that speaks a lot to what Dr. Ella was mentioning earlier about identifying like who you are, what your strengths are, how to leverage that, and how to create your professional persona, so to speak. So this quote made me think of an assessment similar to, and in chapter 2, she mentions a lot about the Gallup assessment and identifying your strengths. But this is an assessment that's pretty free. I think it's free. Yeah, it is free. Here's a link here, and it's called Standout Survey. So it gives you, ways that you can stand out in a professional setting based on how you answer questions. So if you've done an assessment like this before, similar to like a Myers-Briggs or something like that, it gives you things that align with your personality. In the links is a link to the actual assessment. And then there's like a little video about the standout approach if you're not familiar with it. I did share this with Dr. Ella because when we were planning this session, I told her it made me think of this, and she wasn't aware. So something just for her to add to her resource bucket, and then also something for you to add to your resource bucket. So before we continue on, does anyone have anything to share about key takeaways from section 1, or just in general, your response to this quote or anything that we discussed this evening?
I don't have anything extra. All I can say for now is I think I'm going to enjoy going through this book from cover to cover, because as you get toward the end of it, there are a lot of interactive things that you can do in the book that will be very helpful for someone going through the corporate world and being able to know which the best way to navigate the system. So that, yeah, this is very helpful, and thank you for bringing this to us.
Absolutely. I've been enjoying it. And there's a survey at the very beginning, kind of for you to identify, like, let me see if I can find the page. Let's see. I believe it was in chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a short little questionnaire, or maybe it was right before chapter 1. Here it is. It starts on page 15. And
Mm-hmm.
it's about how strong is your career playbook. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was mentioned earlier about like the difference between a mentor and a sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
And so after taking this assessment, uh, I got a high score, but then I got to push myself as to like how to leverage the playbook. So I have
Mm-hmm.
a playbook, but then how do I make sure that I make that playbook work for me? I was in
Right.
another like leadership cohort, and they were talking about making sure you have your board of directors. And so it made me think about this as well. Like who's my board of directors? Who are the people that I can go to in a professional setting? So it doesn't necessarily have to be my direct colleagues, but individuals in like, so I'm in education, the education space that I can go to for advice or feedback, even similar to that survey that's in, or those questions in chapter 3, for you to inquire with others how you are perceived. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought that that was very helpful as well, just really identifying kind of where you are, where your playbook is, and then, figuring out ways on how to leverage it.
Yeah, I thought chapter 1 was very good, particularly the story of you.
Mm-hmm.
That was that was an interesting read. It wasn't an easy read, but it
Right.
was it was very good. It was uh yeah,
Absolutely. Thank you.
yeah, that was a good one.
Any other thoughts or things that you wish was discussed that Dr. Ella didn't get a chance to, but that we can possibly bring back to her as far as providing her some insights on the first section of the book?
Hey, Kyra, this is Vassan.
Hey,
Hey, I'm sorry, I'm not on camera. I'm
that's okay.
multitasking here. But something that you said about the board of directors is very important. A lot of us have people that we confide in and people that we talk to, but it's really important that you have a board of directors that will be honest with you. And with having that honest board of directors, we can't be afraid to hear what they tell us, because oftentimes they see things from a different lens, and we have to be accepting of their perception because sometimes they can see things that you can't see.
Very good. I like that you added that honesty. That's very important. And also just a level of preparedness we need to have to receive that feedback, to receive that honest, candid feedback. So thank you for sharing that, Sam. In the chat, I see Dr. Ashley mentioned about our strengths are the value that we bring. So it is what others notice about you, even when you might not realize it. Absolutely. and I know in chapter 2, she mentions a lot about the Gallup survey and the strengths and identifying your strengths. A lot of times, and I know for a fact, like if I share it with someone like, oh, these are my top 5 strengths, they're like, yep, 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 yep. Can they see those strengths in you? And sometimes they'll be able to identify that strength coming to the forefront, even when you don't even pay, like, you know what that is, that you're right, so being willing to listen and acknowledge that. And then with Ann, yep, I see about being honest, having the board of directors to be honest with you. So don't just pick your friends, right? That's gonna say things and make you feel good and be your cheerleader, which that's great too. But also, how can you have those what I've called or I've learned about critical friends? Who's gonna be that critical friend that pats you on the back when you deserve it, but then maybe give you a little kick when you need it as well. Thank
Exactly.
y'all for that. All right. Anything else? Any other key takeaways? The last thing I wanted to bring up is code switching in chapter 3. She talks about that. And a lot of times people may feel like if they have to code switch, they're not being authentic. Any thoughts or experiences that anyone wants to share about code switching and how you dealt with that?
And code switching is just what you say it is. That's one of those things where I don't think there's any one way to kind of address this. I would think that that would come up as the situation arises, and you just have to figure out what to do in that moment. Particularly when the conversation turns one way or the other. I have worn my hair natural for a really long time. And I had the Black Vice President of Human Resources tell me that my hairdo was, the word he used was aggressive and intimidating, because it was really big before I started cutting it. And whenever I wore my hair out like that, I will be honest, my voice was always a little softer, always. And I was never very comfortable with that, but it made me feel like I had to take some of the edge off, because I was wearing my hair like I wanted to wear it, and it was just a lot of it. But I was really surprised that I had to, and this wasn't that long ago, that I still had to kind of figure out how to maneuver that with the Black man in the company of others, because often he would comment about my hair in the company, and it'd just be the two of us in a room of like 8 or 9 people. And so, it was just really interesting. So it's sad that you still have to go through, or you still have to participate in the code switching, but I
Yeah.
don't know if you can get through a day without doing it.
Yeah, and I when I was teaching, I will always talk to my students about code switching, where, the way you speak with your friends or with your family may differ or should differ in some situations. How you speak to your teacher or your principal or what have you. And so a lot of students will push back and like, oh, I'm not being myself. And so I just kind of had to talk through, like, yeah, you might, talk slang to your friends or use foul language or something like that, or joke or what have you, but it's not appropriate in certain settings. And just knowing when, your grandmother and your mother always say there's a time and a place. And so I kind of equated code aspects of code switching to that as well, for sure.
Yeah.
Just kind of remembering who you are.
Kyra, I'll tell you, this is Beth saying, I'll tell you something very interesting that I think I'm I'm guessing that people on the call can relate to, the different times that I had been told that I speak very well for an African American female. And that is simply just using appropriate grammar, and enunciating. But that I've heard that more times than not. And it was always very troubling to me because I'm saying I'm just talking normal talk. I'm not doing anything different. But the perceptive piece that African Americans are not able to speak in a clear tone, to use appropriate word choices and things of that sort. So while it is not code switching so much, using slang versus the King's English or what have you, I think that's also something very interesting that we as African American females have to deal with when we're in a professional setting.
Absolutely. And I know Crystal mentioned earlier a similar situation. And sometimes it makes you want to reduce who you are, because you're like, I'm not going to speak as much. And if you're expecting less than from me.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Awesome. Thank you. Any other final thoughts before we transition out? So in the chat and on the screen, there is a quick little survey. We love feedback. We want to continue to offer more sessions like this and continue to offer sessions like this based on feedback we received last year. And so if you could just complete that survey, you will be entered into a drawing to receive a prize. The special prize would be, or gift would be, either Dr. Ella's first book or the Gallup Strengths Finder 2.0. So if you're not familiar with that, you can kind of understand what that is, what she talks about in chapter 2, and identify your top strengths. So if you could, you can snap that QR code, or the link is in the chat. I'll give you a moment to grab that while I drop a few more things in the chat before we close out today. The last thing is that we want to remind you that we are going to do section 2 rather on October 23rd. And so a little over a month away. And the link for that to register is in the chat. And then section 3 of the book will wrap it up. Our last discussion will be November the 13th, both at 7 o'clock. And the link to register for that event is there. A last reminder about, if you can attend tomorrow evening, I believe she said 7 o'clock, the information is in the Google form, to stop by the gathering spot, and you'll get to meet Dr. Ella, bring her greetings on behalf of Spelman Atlanta Alumni Chapter, and to really delve deeper into the text with our other Spelman sister, Nzinga Shaw. So we want to thank you so very much for joining our discussion this evening. We had the special pleasure of having the author herself here to chat with us, for us to engage with her, for her to offer us advice as new professionals, as veteran professionals in our various career fields. And for that, we thank you for your engagement. We thank you for your questions, and we thank you for your words of wisdom as we discuss Unspoken. So at this time, I would like to say good night to everyone. Thank you again, and we hope to see you for section 2 of the discussion. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Howard, can you stay on for a quick second? You ever saying?
I sure can.
Okay.